The Apache tribe accused the rancher, until the chief's daughter spoke just 4 words. The sun had just begun to rise over the dry valley, painting the sky with streaks of orange and pink. The air was crisp, carrying the faint scent of the earth after a cool night. In this quiet place lived Samuel, a rancher whose life was tied to the land. Every morning he would wake before the sun, his hands rough and calloused from years of hard work. His small ranch was not just a property, it was a home, a source of pride, and a legacy passed down from his father. Samuel loved the land, the smell of hay in the barns, the sound of the wind through the trees, and even the long, hot days when the sun seemed to press down on him. Life was simple, honest, and full of routine, and he had learned long ago that survival here required patience, skill, and respect for nature. Not far from Samuel's ranch lived the Apache tribe. They were a proud people, connected deeply to the land and the traditions of their ancestors. They respected the earth, the rivers, and the animals, and they knew how to live in harmony with nature. The tribe's leader, Chief Red Hawk, was wise and careful. He had spent his life learning about the land, the plants, and the seasons, and he understood the importance of teaching his people patience and respect. Among his family was his daughter, Iana, who was known for her sharp mind and her ability to notice things that others often missed. She watched the world with quiet observation, speaking only when she had something important to say. For many years, Samuel and the Apache tribe had lived near each other without serious conflict. There had been small disagreements, as often happens when people share the same land, but nothing had ever grown into something dangerous. Samuel respected the tribe's boundaries, and the tribe respected his efforts to live honestly. Yet, even in peaceful valleys, tension can grow quietly, like weeds in the soil. The land was dry and water sources were limited. Both ranchers and the tribe relied on the river that ran through the valley, and each spring, when the snow melted from the mountains, everyone hoped there would be enough water for their crops, their livestock, and their daily needs. One particular spring, the weather had been harsher than usual. Rain had been scarce, and the river flowed lower than Samuel had ever seen. The grass in his fields was dry, and the cattle struggled to find enough food. Samuel worked from dawn to dusk, moving fences, feeding animals, and making sure the water troughs were filled. His hands were sore, and his back ached, but he felt a quiet satisfaction in seeing the farm survive another season. Life was never easy here, but Samuel believed that honesty and hard work would guide him through any challenge. One morning, as Samuel walked toward the barn to check on his cattle, he noticed something strange. A few of the cows were missing. His stomach sank. He counted again, and the numbers confirmed his worst fear. Several of his finest cows had disappeared overnight. Panic and frustration pressed down on him. Losing cattle meant more than just financial loss. It threatened his family's survival and the work he had poured into the ranch for years. He ran toward the fences, checking for broken gates or signs of intruders. The ground was soft from the previous night's dew, and soon he found tracks leading away from his property. They were deep and wide, suggesting many feet had passed through. His heart pounded as he followed them toward the border of the land he shared with the Apache tribe. Word of the missing cattle spread quickly. Samuel knew the tribe would hear about it soon. By midday, rumors had reached the village. The elders gathered quietly, speaking in low tones. They had long valued fairness and justice, and they knew that every action had consequences. Some of the younger members of the tribe whispered that the rancher must have acted carelessly or even dishonestly. They had seen outsiders in other valleys take more than they deserved, and memories of past conflicts made suspicion easy to believe. Chief Red Hawk called for a council meeting, determined to uncover the truth. He knew that rash decisions could bring disaster. Every word spoken in the council would matter, and every action taken could either prevent conflict or provoke it. Samuel, meanwhile, felt the weight of worry pressing against his chest. He had never wanted trouble with the tribe. He respected their traditions and their connection to the land. He believed in fairness and honesty, and yet here he was, standing at the edge of suspicion. He knew that the footprints near his fence could easily be misinterpreted. Perhaps a young member of the tribe had wandered into his property by accident, or perhaps the tracks belonged to someone else entirely. Samuel's mind raced with possibilities, each one heavier than the last. He worked hard every day, and he could not understand why anyone would think he had done harm. The council meeting was called for the following day. The elders gathered in a circle outside the main lodge, the rising sun casting long shadows across the dry earth. Samuel approached carefully, bowing respectfully to the chief. He spoke in a calm voice, explaining what had happened. "I found my cattle missing this morning," he said. "I do not know who took them, but I mean no harm to your people or your land. I work hard to protect my animals and I respect your traditions. Please, let us find a solution together." Some of the elders murmured among themselves, unsure whether to believe him. Suspicion is a heavy burden, and past experiences often shape it more strongly than evidence. Memories of old conflicts and unfair dealings made some quick to judge. Others, however, noticed Samuel's sincerity. They remembered his years of honest work and how he had treated the land with care. Still, the air was thick with tension, and no one spoke a final word. Chief Red Hawk watched silently, his face calm but unreadable. Samuel waited, feeling the silence stretch on, the weight of potential anger and misunderstanding pressing against him like the hot midday sun. Nearby, Ayanna watched the scene quietly. She had observed Samuel many times over the past seasons, noticing the care he took with his land and his animals. She had seen him repair fences that protected the river, plant trees to prevent erosion, and feed injured animals he found wandering near his property. She felt a quiet respect for him and wanted the others to see the truth as clearly as she did. But she remained silent for now, waiting for the right moment to speak. As the sun climbed higher, the tension in the valley did not fade. Samuel returned to his ranch, checking fences, examining tracks, and trying to piece together what had happened. He walked slowly, every step heavy with worry, feeling the eyes of the tribe watching him even from a distance. The land seemed quieter than usual, almost holding its breath, as if it too waited for the truth to come out. By evening, Samuel sat on a small wooden bench outside his house. The sky turned orange and purple, and the first stars appeared. He sighed deeply, feeling both exhaustion and unease. He had worked hard all his life, lived honestly and respected those around him, and yet he was accused, if only silently, of wrongdoing. The valley was peaceful on the surface, but underneath, a storm of suspicion and tension had begun. He thought of the coming council, the questions he would face, and the weight of every glance directed his way. Samuel knew he could not control how others felt, but he could control how he acted. He promised himself that he would remain honest, patient, and respectful. He would show the tribe, through his actions and his words, that he was not their enemy. And perhaps, in time, understanding and trust could grow where fear and suspicion had taken root. The night deepened, the stars shining over the quiet valley, and Samuel felt both the weight of the challenge and the quiet hope that truth and patience could guide him through it. And so, the first day of the storm passed, with Samuel standing quietly on the edge of suspicion, the Apache tribe preparing to confront what they believed had happened, and the valley itself holding its breath, waiting for the moment when words and actions would finally bring clarity. The next morning, the valley was alive with whispers. Word of the missing cattle had spread quickly, and the tension between Samuel and the Apache tribe had grown thicker. The tribe's elders were meeting in a large circle outside the main lodge, their faces serious and thoughtful. They had seen many challenges in their lives, but nothing weighed as heavily as the feeling that someone might have broken the trust that bound their people to the land. They had to act carefully. A single mistake could turn suspicion into anger and anger into conflict. Samuel approached the meeting place cautiously, his boots crunching softly on the dry soil. He carried no weapons and raised his hands slightly in respect, knowing that even small gestures mattered when tensions ran high. The elders watched him carefully, their expressions unreadable. The chief, Red Hawk, remained silent at the center of the circle, his eyes steady but full of thought. Samuel's heart beat faster, but he reminded himself to remain calm. He had nothing to hide, and he would speak honestly as he always had. "I did not take the cattle," Samuel said, his voice steady but firm. "I do not know who took them, but I mean no harm to your people. I respect your land and your traditions. I ask only that we find a way to understand what happened without anger or blame." Some of the younger members of the tribe whispered to each other, glancing at Samuel with suspicion. Memories of past conflicts with outsiders had left deep impressions. They remembered settlers taking more than they needed or ignoring warnings, and it was easy to jump to conclusions. "How can we trust him?" one whispered. "He has his own interests. Perhaps he does not care about our land." Others hesitated, recalling the many times Samuel had shown care for the land. He had repaired fences that protected the river, helped in planting trees to prevent soil erosion, and even saved an injured deer that had wandered too close to his ranch. They remembered seeing him work quietly, never asking for thanks or recognition. Could someone like him really be dishonest? The elders exchanged glances, unsure how to interpret the events of the past night. Chief Red Hawk listened in silence, observing both Samuel and his own people. He had always valued patience, and he understood that rushing to judgment could bring more harm than good. His face showed no emotion, but his eyes missed nothing. He noticed the lines of worry on Samuel's face, the careful way he chose his words, the honesty that shone through even in the tense air. He also saw the fear and concern in the eyes of his people, the desire to protect the land and their families. The council discussion began. One elder spoke first, his voice low but firm. "We must decide what happened," he said. "The cattle were lost and something must be done. We cannot let harm go unanswered." Another elder nodded. "But we must also be careful. Accusing someone wrongly could bring anger and even violence. We have seen too much of that in the past." Samuel watched the conversation quietly, hoping that reason would win over suspicion. He understood why the tribe was cautious. After all, his arrival in the valley and the presence of his ranch might have seemed threatening, even if he had lived honestly for many years. He took a deep breath and spoke again. "I want to help find the truth. I do not want conflict. If anyone has questions, I will answer them honestly. I want to work together to protect this land and all who live on it." The elders remained silent for a moment, considering his words. The air was heavy with thought and worry. Even a small gesture or word could tip the balance one way or another. Some members of the tribe felt a spark of hope, that perhaps this man could be trusted. Others remained doubtful, their memories of past difficulties making it hard to accept that an outsider could act with complete honesty. Meanwhile, the valley itself seemed to watch the unfolding events. The river ran quietly, reflecting the morning sun. Birds sang softly, and the wind whispered through the trees. Even the land seemed to wait for a decision, as if holding its breath along with the people. Samuel felt the quiet weight of the valley pressing around him, reminding him that every choice mattered. The discussion continued for hours. Questions were asked, explanations were repeated, and stories of past events were remembered. Samuel answered each question calmly, recounting the details of his morning discovery, the missing cattle, and the tracks he had found leading toward the edge of the Apache lands. He explained that he had worked carefully to maintain fences, feed his animals, and respect the boundaries that separated his land from the tribe's territory. Slowly, some of the elders began to nod, seeing the honesty in his words and the care in his actions. Others still held back, unsure whether to trust him fully. The air was tense, but there was a shift, a feeling that perhaps understanding could emerge from the fear and suspicion. Samuel sensed this change and kept his calm, knowing that patience was the only way to gain trust in a situation so delicate. As the day passed, Samuel walked quietly among the tribe, observing their customs, listening to their stories and showing respect for their traditions. He helped repair a small section of fence near the river, showing that he cared not only for his land, but for the land that touched the tribe's territory. He asked questions about the plants, the soil, and the river, genuinely wanting to understand the life and work of the people around him. Some of the younger members began to see his sincerity, noticing that his actions matched his words. By late afternoon, the tension had not disappeared, but it had softened. Chief Red Hawk had remained quiet throughout the day, observing everything with careful eyes. He saw the way Samuel interacted with the land and the people, the way he respected boundaries, and the way he spoke honestly even when it was difficult. He also watched his daughter, Yana, who had remained silent but attentive. She observed Samuel as well, noticing the patience in his eyes, the respect in his words, and the care in his actions. Yana had always been wise beyond her years. She could see truth where others saw only appearances. She knew that accusations could destroy relationships, and that misunderstandings often led to conflict. She also understood that the land itself had its own voice, speaking through actions, patience, and observation. As she watched Samuel, she began to feel a quiet certainty that he had done no harm. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the valley, the council meeting drew to a close for the day. The elders had not reached a final decision, but they had agreed to continue observing, to watch both Samuel and the land, and to gather more information before taking any action. Samuel returned to his ranch, exhausted but relieved that the day had passed without anger or confrontation. He walked along the fences, checking the fields and the remaining cattle. The missing animals were still gone, but he felt a quiet determination. He would continue to work honestly, show respect for the tribe, and wait patiently for the truth to be recognized. He knew that trust could not be demanded. It had to be earned through actions and time. That evening, Samuel sat on the porch of his small house, watching the stars appear one by one in the clear night sky. The wind was soft, carrying the distant sounds of the tribe's village. He thought about the day's events, the tension, the questions, and the careful observation of both the elders and the chief. He understood the weight of their responsibility, and he respected their caution. He also knew that in time, truth and honesty would shine through. In the quiet night, Samuel could feel the valley itself holding its breath, waiting for the moment when understanding would come. He felt a mixture of worry and hope, knowing that the path ahead would not be easy, but believing that patience, respect, and honesty would guide him through. He thought about the future, about the possibility of peace between his ranch and the tribe, and about the lessons that would be learned from these events. By the time the stars had filled the sky, Samuel had made a promise to himself. He would continue to act with integrity, protect his land, and show respect to the Apache tribe. He would answer questions honestly, listen carefully, and remain patient. He knew that the coming days would test him, that misunderstandings could arise, and that fear could cloud judgment. But he also believed that truth, observed patiently and spoken wisely, had the power to calm fear, resolve tension, and prevent conflict. And so, as the valley lay under the soft glow of the moon, the stage was set. Suspicion still lingered like a shadow, but hope had begun to grow. Samuel, the rancher, had shown patience and respect. The Apache tribe, led by Chief Red Hawk and watched closely by Ayanna, would continue their observations. Both sides waited, each aware that the coming moments would test trust, courage, and wisdom. In this quiet valley, the story of misunderstanding, patience, and the search for truth was only beginning, and every action, every word, and every choice would matter in the days to come. The next few days passed slowly in the valley, but the tension in the air did not ease. Samuel continued his work on the ranch, repairing fences, feeding the cattle, and checking every corner of his property. Each task he performed carried a quiet weight now, not just because of the missing animals, but because of the eyes that seemed to watch him from a distance. The Apache tribe remained cautious. Their elders observed Samuel carefully, noting every action, every word, and every gesture. They had grown up with the lessons of history. Outsiders could sometimes harm the land without meaning to, and even small mistakes could escalate into disaster. Despite this, Samuel remained calm. He understood the situation perfectly. Trust could not be demanded, it had to be earned. He made a point to treat the land and the tribe's traditions with the utmost respect. He avoided going near the sacred areas, stayed out of the riverbanks that were important to the tribe, and spoke politely whenever he interacted with them. Even when some of the younger tribe members whispered suspicion, he did not respond with anger. Instead, he continued to work honestly, showing through his actions that he meant no harm. Ayanna, the chief's daughter, had been watching him more closely than anyone else. She noticed the little things that others might miss. The way he carefully walked over fragile plants, how he spoke softly when the animals were near, and the way he repaired broken fences without leaving traces of carelessness. She had grown up learning to read people, to see the truth behind words and actions, and she felt increasingly certain that Samuel's intentions were genuine. But she remained silent. The council had not yet reached a conclusion, and she knew the timing of words could change everything. Speaking too soon might anger the elders or create confusion. Meanwhile, the valley itself seemed to reflect the growing unease. The sun rose and fell each day, but the birds sang less, and even the wind seemed to move more slowly, as if holding its breath. The missing cattle had still not been found, and the tribe continued to worry about the possibility of trespassing or wrongdoing. Each night the elders would discuss what they had observed during the day. They remembered the past times when outsiders had caused harm, even unintentionally, and they were determined not to make a mistake. Samuel's honesty was clear to some of them, but caution remained strong. Samuel did not know that he was under such close observation. To him, it felt like a normal series of days, filled with hard work and quiet reflection. He mended fences along the property line, ensuring that the cattle could not wander further, and checked the remaining herd carefully. He walked along the riverbank, noticing the small changes in the land, the dry patches where water was scarce, and the areas where plants had begun to wilt. He thought about the balance between human work and nature, realizing that patience and care were needed for both. The tribe's elders had begun to discuss the matter more deeply. "We must decide soon," said one elder, his voice calm but firm. "If the rancher is honest, we will protect the peace. If he is not, the consequences could be serious." "We cannot ignore this," another elder added, "but we have seen him work. He repairs fences, feeds the land, and respects our boundaries. Can we trust the evidence of our eyes over the fear of the past?" Even among the elders, opinions differed. Some could not shake the memory of previous conflicts, when outsiders had taken resources or caused harm. Others saw Samuel's consistent care for the land and began to hope that he was indeed honest. They discussed quietly, weighing actions against words and patience against fear. Chief Red Hawk listened to every argument, saying nothing. His eyes watched Samuel from a distance, noting every gesture and movement, as if the truth of the situation could be read in the careful steps and quiet work of the man before him. Gianna continued to observe silently. She felt a sense of responsibility growing inside her. She knew that the elders would ultimately look to her father for guidance, and she also knew that her words could influence the council greatly. But she did not speak yet. Instead, she paid attention to the little things. The way Samuel lifted heavy logs without damaging the grass, how he guided his remaining cattle safely to fresh pasture, and how he stopped to mend a broken bird's nest he had accidentally disturbed. To Ayana, these actions spoke louder than any words ever could. By the fourth day, tension in the valley had reached a quiet climax. Samuel had continued his work, never showing frustration, never raising his voice, and never failing to respect the land. The elders had gathered again, this time with more urgency. They discussed not only the missing cattle but also the meaning of trust, responsibility, and observation. One elder said, "It is not just the action but the intention behind it that matters. We must see the heart of the person, not only the results of his work." Another elder nodded, "And his work has been consistent, careful, and honest. Yet our fear is strong and the past warns us to remain cautious." Samuel, unaware of these private discussions, continued to walk the line between his ranch and the edge of the tribe's territory. He repaired broken fence posts, ensured the remaining cattle had food and water, and walked quietly along the edges of the river to check for footprints. Each action reinforced the honesty of his intentions, even as he remained unaware of how closely he was being observed. Gianna finally approached him one morning, walking along a path she had carefully chosen to remain unseen by others. "You work carefully," she said softly, her voice gentle but clear. Samuel looked up, surprised but respectful. "I try," he replied. "I do not want to cause harm to your land or your people. I want to do what is right." Gianna observed him for a moment, noting the sincerity in his eyes. She could see no deceit, no hidden motives, only a man committed to his work and to doing what was right. "You respect the land," she said, nodding slightly. "That is important." Samuel smiled quietly. "I have learned that the land teaches us every day. We must listen if we want to survive and thrive." Gianna felt a small relief, knowing that someone outside her tribe understood the importance of respect and balance. Yet she knew the council still needed more time to see the truth for themselves. The following days were filled with observation, quiet work, and small acts of care. Samuel continued to repair fences, tend to his cattle, and observe the land. He even helped a few members of the tribe with minor tasks, though always from a distance, showing his willingness to cooperate without overstepping. The elders noticed these actions and began to see a pattern. Samuel's behavior had been consistent, honest, and respectful from the start. Slowly, doubt began to fade, replaced by cautious trust. By the end of the week, the valley seemed to hold its breath, waiting for a sign that would confirm the truth. Samuel had done nothing wrong, yet the question of trust remained. The tribe, led by Chief Red Hawk and guided silently by Gianna, continued their careful observation. The missing cattle had still not been found, but the actions and intentions of Samuel had begun to speak louder than the empty fields. Gianna finally felt that the time to speak might soon come. She knew the weight of her words and the impact they could have on both Samuel and her people. She had watched, observed, and considered every detail. She had seen the honesty in Samuel's work, the care in his actions, and the patience in his demeanor. She knew that the decision would not come from fear or rumor, but from truth, seen clearly and acknowledged openly. Samuel, unaware of the decisions forming behind the lodge walls, continued his routine, determined to act with integrity no matter the outcome. He repaired fences with care, checked the cattle daily, and treated the land with the respect it deserved. Each evening, he would sit quietly on his porch, reflecting on the day and considering how patience and honesty could guide him through the tension that hung over the valley like a low cloud. The The tribe's elders met one last time before the council would make its decision. They discussed Samuel's actions, the balance of the land, and the importance of intention. Chief Red Hawk remained silent, listening to each word, observing both Samuel and his daughter. Yana's presence was quiet but significant, her careful observation and understanding of human character shaping the final considerations of the elders. And so, the stage was set for what would come next. Suspicion had been weighed, patience had been tested, and observation had revealed the truth hidden in actions rather than words. Samuel had demonstrated honesty, care, and respect, while the Apache tribe had held fast to their principles of caution and justice. The valley waited, the sun casting long shadows across the dry earth, and every soul understood that the coming moment would change everything. In this quiet tension, the story of misunderstanding, trust, and the search for truth had reached its peak. Samuel's actions had spoken louder than accusations, and the tribe's careful observation had ensured that fairness would prevail. But the final word, the moment that would resolve the tension and bring clarity to the valley, was still waiting to be spoken. Days passed in the valley, and the tension that had built up between Samuel and the Apache tribe was like a heavy cloud hanging over the land. Samuel continued his work on the ranch, doing everything carefully and quietly. He fed his cattle, repaired broken fences, and walked the edges of his property to make sure nothing was missing or damaged. He worked in silence, with patience as his guide, knowing that anger or frustration would only make the situation worse. Every action mattered, and every detail could affect the delicate balance between himself and the tribe. The tribe, led by Chief Red Hawk, continued their careful observation. The elders had gathered multiple times, discussing what they had seen, weighing evidence, and listening to the younger members' opinions. The memory of past conflicts with outsiders made some hesitant to trust Samuel completely. Even though his actions had shown honesty and respect, the elders knew that appearances could be deceiving. They had seen too many people act kindly on the surface while hiding selfish intentions. Meanwhile, Yana, the chief's daughter, had watched Samuel closely every day. She had seen the way he worked with care, the way he treated the animals gently, and the way he respected the land. More importantly, she had noticed his consistency. Samuel did not just act honestly when others were watching, he acted with integrity at all times. This had not escaped her attention. She had grown up learning to read people, to notice the truth in small gestures, and to sense the meaning behind actions rather than just words. The elders called for another council meeting, and this time the air was heavier than ever. Samuel arrived, carrying himself with calm dignity, knowing that he would have to face questions again. The council gathered in a circle, with Chief Red Hawk at the center. Samuel bowed respectfully before the chief and the elders. The sun shone down on the dry earth, casting long shadows that mirrored the tension in the council. Every eye in the circle watched Samuel closely, waiting for evidence of guilt or truth. One elder spoke first, his voice steady but firm. "We have watched him for several days," he said. "We have observed his actions, and yet the missing cattle remain unaccounted for. We must decide whether he acted with honesty or harm." Another elder added, "His work has been careful, and he has shown respect for the land. But can we trust our eyes over our fears? The past warns us to be cautious." Samuel listened quietly, his heart steady but tense. He knew that the truth of his actions was clear, but he also understood the weight of history and suspicion in the tribe. He bowed his head and spoke calmly. "I have done nothing to harm your people or your land. I seek only to protect my animals and live honestly. If my actions have caused misunderstanding, I am willing to help clarify everything. I mean no disrespect." The elders nodded, considering his words. They could see his sincerity, but caution still lingered. The council continued, discussing the evidence and considering every detail. They spoke of trust, responsibility, and the importance of intention over mere results. Some elders were persuaded by Samuel's honesty, while others remained hesitant. Suspicion is a difficult thing to remove once it has taken root, and even truth must prove itself through time and action. Ayanna watched everything silently. She understood the importance of her role. Her father, the chief, had always valued her insight, and she knew that when the time was right, her voice could help guide the council toward the truth. She looked at Samuel carefully, noting the way he held himself with patience and humility. She saw the quiet determination in his eyes, the consistency of his work, and the respect he showed toward the land and the people. After a long silence, Ayanna stepped forward. Her voice was soft, yet it carried a calm authority that commanded attention. The council turned to her, waiting for her words. All eyes in the valley seemed to pause, as if even the land itself was listening. Ayanna spoke clearly and simply. He did no harm. The council was silent for a moment. Those 4 words carried a weight that no long speech could match. They cut through the tension and suspicion, bringing clarity to a situation that had been clouded by fear and misunderstanding. The elders looked at each other, seeing the truth reflected in her words and in the observations they had made over the past days. Chief Red Hawk nodded slowly, acknowledging the wisdom of his daughter and the honesty of Samuel. A wave of relief passed through the valley. The tension that had gripped everyone's hearts began to lift. Samuel felt his shoulders relax, and a genuine smile crossed his face. He bowed respectfully to Ayanna and the chief, grateful not only for their recognition of his honesty, but also for the wisdom that had guided them to the truth. The tribe, too, felt a release from fear and suspicion. They had acted cautiously, observed carefully, and now they could trust the man who had lived among them with respect and integrity. The atmosphere changed immediately. Conversations became warmer, smiles appeared, and a sense of peace returned to the valley. Samuel continued to show humility and respect, understanding that trust is not built in a single day, even after the truth is known. The elders spoke quietly among themselves, acknowledging that patience and careful observation had led them to the right conclusion. They had learned that judgment without understanding could have led to conflict, but truth, seen clearly and spoken wisely, had restored harmony. Ayanna remained near Samuel, her eyes thoughtful. She felt a quiet pride in having spoken the words that could guide the council and her people toward understanding. She had observed carefully, waited patiently, and now her voice had brought peace. She knew that these moments were rare and precious, when truth, courage, and wisdom combined to prevent conflict and build trust. Samuel looked at her with gratitude and respect, sensing the deep insight and integrity she carried. The chief Red Hawk finally spoke, his voice calm and measured. "Let this be a lesson to all of us," he said. "Patience and observation guide us better than anger or assumption. We must learn to see the truth in action, not just in words or fear. This man has shown honesty, and we will respect him as one who walks with integrity on this land." Samuel nodded, humbled by the chief's words. He knew that respect must be mutual, that trust had to be earned, and that living honestly in a shared valley required both care and humility. He promised himself to continue acting with integrity, protecting the land, and cooperating with the tribe. He also understood the significance of Ayanna's words, 4 simple words that had changed the course of events, restored peace, and reminded everyone of the power of truth. The days that followed were filled with quiet cooperation. Samuel worked alongside the tribe in small ways, always respectful and careful. He helped repair fences, maintained the paths along the river, and tended to the land with the same patience he had shown all along. The tribe began to see him not as an outsider, but as someone who could share the valley responsibly. Ayanna continued to watch, quietly guiding the younger members and helping them understand the importance of observation, patience, and integrity. The missing cattle were never found, but their absence no longer mattered. The focus had shifted from blame to understanding, from suspicion to cooperation. Samuel and the tribe had learned that misunderstandings could be resolved through honesty, careful observation, and courage in speaking the truth. The valley itself seemed to reflect this change. The river flowed gently, the grass grew stronger, and the wind carried a sense of peace and balance that had not been present before. Samuel felt a deep sense of gratitude. He had faced suspicion, endured doubt, and waited patiently while his integrity was questioned. Through it all, he had acted honestly and respectfully, knowing that time and observation would reveal the truth. He now understood the value of patience, of listening, and of showing respect not just through words, but through consistent action. Iana, too, felt a sense of fulfillment. She had watched carefully, waited for the right moment, and spoken the words that brought clarity and peace. She had demonstrated wisdom beyond her years and had reminded everyone that even a few words spoken at the right time could change the course of events, prevent conflict, and restore harmony. The valley returned to a quiet rhythm. Samuel continued his work on the ranch, and the tribe continued their life along the river and hills. Trust had been rebuilt, and relationships had strengthened. Both sides now understood that peace required observation, honesty, patience, and the courage to speak the truth when the time was right. The story of these days in the valley, the tension, the suspicion, and the ultimate resolution, would be remembered for years. It became a lesson about patience, observation, and the power of truth. It showed that misunderstandings could be resolved when people acted with integrity and courage. And it reminded everyone that even 4 simple words could change the course of events and restore balance to a troubled land. And so, as the sun set over the valley, casting its warm light over the fields, the fences, and the river, both Samuel and the Apache tribe felt a renewed sense of trust. They had faced suspicion and tension, but they had also learned the value of patience, observation, and truth. The valley, once heavy with uncertainty, now breathed a quiet peace, carrying the lesson of those days like a gentle wind through the hills and rivers, reminding all who lived there that honesty, respect, and courage would always guide them home. The valley had begun to breathe with a new sense of peace. After Iana's words, "He did no harm," tension slowly faded like morning fog under the rising sun. Samuel continued his work on the ranch, but now he did so with a feeling of quiet relief. He had endured days of suspicion, of being watched carefully by the Apache tribe, and yet he had remained patient and honest. His efforts had finally been recognized, and the valley seemed to hum with calm, as if nature itself approved of the resolution. Life returned to a steady rhythm, but with subtle changes. Samuel noticed the tribe moving through the hills with trust rather than caution. Children played near the riverbanks without fear, and the elders' conversations included his name alongside discussions of land and resources. Samuel had earned respect not by words alone, but through his consistent actions and integrity. The valley felt lighter, the air fresher, and even the wind seemed to carry the quiet song of reconciliation. Samuel began to interact more with the tribe, though always with care and respect. He helped repair old fences along the border, ensuring that livestock would not wander into sacred spaces. He assisted in maintaining the river paths, which were crucial for both the tribe and his cattle. He learned from the elders about the plants, their uses, and the importance of preserving certain areas for the tribe's traditions. In return, he shared knowledge about the ranching work he had done for years, showing how they could work together without harming the land. Iana watched these interactions with quiet satisfaction. She had always been perceptive, noticing the honesty in Samuel's actions and the care he showed for both land and people. She also understood the delicate balance of trust. It could be built only through consistency and respect. She guided the younger members of the tribe, teaching them the value of observation, patience, and the power of speaking truth at the right moment. Her presence became a bridge between Samuel and the community, helping both sides understand one another. Samuel, for his part, felt a growing sense of belonging. He had come to the valley as an outsider, and yet through patience, integrity, and respect, he had become part of the community in a new way. He no longer felt tension in every glance from the tribe. Instead, he saw recognition and acceptance. Even the elders who had once been doubtful now nodded as he passed, acknowledging the honesty he had shown. Trust had been rebuilt, and with it came cooperation and mutual understanding. The months that followed brought new opportunities for collaboration. Samuel and the tribe worked together to improve the land. Fences were strengthened, irrigation paths were shared, and both sides learned from each other's knowledge of the valley. Samuel taught the tribe ways to manage cattle without damaging the sacred areas, while the tribe shared methods for conserving water, protecting plants, and understanding seasonal changes. The valley became a place where knowledge was exchanged openly, and the line between outsider and tribe member began to blur in a positive way. Children from the tribe and the rancher's family began to play together along the river, learning to respect the land while enjoying the valley's beauty. They chased one another through the tall grass, watched the birds along the river, and listened to stories from both sides. Samuel often smiled as he observed them, seeing in their laughter the fruits of patience, understanding, and trust. The elders, too, observed quietly, knowing that the future of the valley depended on teaching cooperation and respect from a young age. Even the land itself seemed to respond to the harmony. The river flowed steadily, nourished by careful management on both sides. The fields grew healthier, and the grass that had once been dry and brittle became thick and strong. Samuel's cattle thrived, and the tribe's animals and crops benefited as well. The valley, once tense and shadowed by suspicion, now felt alive with possibility. Every action taken with care and honesty seemed to strengthen the bond between people and land. Jana continued to play an important role in this renewed peace. She became a trusted advisor to both the chief and Samuel, helping to mediate when minor disagreements arose. She reminded the tribe and the rancher that trust is not permanent. It must be nurtured every day through patience, honesty, and respect. Her quiet wisdom inspired others to act with integrity, and the valley became a living example of how understanding and cooperation could overcome suspicion and conflict. Samuel felt a deep gratitude for the lessons he had learned in the valley. He understood now that living honestly was not only about personal effort, but also about showing respect for others, observing carefully, and waiting for the right moment to speak and act. He knew that patience and consistency were as important as words, and that actions often carried more weight than even the clearest speech. He also realized the value of guidance from others, like Ayana and the elders, whose wisdom had helped him navigate a difficult situation. The elders, too, reflected on the events. They had acted cautiously, observed carefully, and allowed the truth to emerge naturally. They had taught the tribe and the valley a powerful lesson. That judgment without understanding can lead to conflict, but patience, observation, and honesty can create harmony. They saw Samuel as a model of integrity, and they recognized that cooperation with outsiders could be positive when approached with care and respect. As time went on, Samuel and the tribe began to share traditions and stories. They learned from each other's histories, celebrated small victories in farming and ranching, and honored the land together. The valley had become a place where mutual respect and understanding flourished. Samuel no longer felt like a guest or an outsider. He was part of a community that valued honesty, patience, and integrity. Gianna's 4 words had changed everything. He did no harm, but their significance went far beyond that moment. They reminded the tribe, Samuel, and anyone who heard the story that truth can prevent conflict, that patience and observation are powerful, and that understanding often comes from careful attention rather than hasty judgment. The valley became known as a place of reconciliation and cooperation, where people learned to work together for the good of everyone. Samuel often reflected on the experience. He remembered the fear he had felt when suspicion first fell on him, the quiet weight of the council's watchful eyes, and the long days of work under the sun. He remembered Ayanna's words and how they had lifted the burden from his shoulders, restoring peace not only to him but to the valley itself. He knew that honesty, respect, and patience were not just words. They were actions that shaped every day, every relationship, and every part of the land. The valley continued to thrive. Samuel's ranch prospered, the tribe's crops flourished, and the river ran clear and steady. The people learned that cooperation brought more benefits than conflict, and that respect for one another and for the land could create harmony where tension had once existed. Even in times of challenge, they remembered the lessons of patience, observation, and speaking the truth. Children grew up hearing the story of those tense days and how one person's honesty and one young woman's courage had prevented a disaster. They learned that suspicion and fear can cloud judgment, but that patience and careful observation can reveal the truth. They saw how actions mattered more than words alone, and how respect for the land and for one another was essential for a peaceful life. Samuel and Ayanna often walked together along the river, sharing thoughts about the land, the animals, and the lessons they had learned. Samuel appreciated her insight and wisdom, knowing that her words had not only resolved a tense situation, but had also guided the valley toward a brighter future. He felt a bond with her and the community that went beyond mere friendship, a bond built on mutual respect, understanding, and shared responsibility for the land. The elders, observing these moments, felt a quiet satisfaction. They had guided the tribe through a challenging situation, ensuring that justice, patience, and careful observation prevailed. They saw the benefits of collaboration between Samuel and the tribe, and they hoped that this story would inspire future generations to act with integrity, patience, and respect. The valley had changed. It was no longer just a place of tension and suspicion. It had become a place of learning, cooperation, and peace. Samuel's honesty, Ayanna's courage, and the wisdom of the elders had transformed it into a living example of how truth, patience, and observation can guide communities through difficult times. As the sun set over the valley, painting the sky with shades of gold and crimson, Samuel and the tribe stood together, united in purpose and understanding. They had faced fear, suspicion, and misunderstanding, and yet through patience, observation, and honesty, they had found harmony. The land, the people, and the animals thrived together, each part supporting the others. And so, the valley remained a symbol of reconciliation and trust, a place where actions spoke louder than accusations, where patience and honesty built bridges, and where even a few simple words, spoken at the right time, could change the course of history. Samuel, Ayanna, the tribe, and the land itself had all learned that the greatest strength comes from integrity, respect, and understanding. The story of Samuel and the Apache tribe became a lesson that endured. It was a reminder that patience and observation can reveal the truth, that honesty in action matters more than words alone, and that courage and wisdom can prevent conflict and create lasting peace. The valley, once tense and uncertain, had become a place of hope, learning, and shared responsibility, a living testament to the power of respect, truth, and cooperation.